Eric, am I right? Right? Okay. Why don't our victors coming up here, and Kristen will take you guys back to get a victory soda or candy. Sorry, my guitar's feeding back over here. Okay, chill out. Okay. All right, guys. Well done. Well done. That game is a classic, actually. It's a classic rock game. We just haven't done it in a super long time. So there you go. But I realize we haven't done a lot of dodgeball games in a really long time. I don't know why, but we've just kind of not been doing a lot of dodgeball games. We used to do them a lot more. In fact, my favorite dodgeball story was actually Tracy's first day at the Rock, like 5 years ago, whenever that was. I don't know, it was a while ago, but it was her first time at the Rock, and we were playing in the atrium, and I just like wound up with the ball, and I got a pretty good right arm with the dodgeball, and I just whipped it like as hard as I could, and it just like it was like this big pile of humanity, and in the middle of it was Tracy. And everyone just kind of like dodged the ball. Like it was like the parting of the Red Sea. Like everyone just got out of the way of the ball except for Tracy's face. And it just went like straight into her face, like right into the glasses. Like there was blood. Like it was incredible. Like it was absolutely incredible. It was Dr. Dodgeball and she was the doctor. That was the other. No, I thought you were protecting the doctor. She was protecting the doctor. Nobody else stayed the course. She did. Yeah, she was trying to protect the doctor. And yeah, Dr. Dodgeball, that is like super classic. You know what the most classic is though? This is what I played in the youth group. It was called Firing Squad, and everyone would go against a wall, and then there'd be a couple dodgeball throwers and would just chuck it at you, and like you had to be the last one standing. So that's like super classic dodgeball, but that was also these like rubber balls that like left an imprint on your face when it hit your face. That was just better times, you know? All right, guys. One quick announcement is that next week is kind of a sad week because if it hadn't been for COVID-19, we would have been ready to go to summer camp next week. Like literally next Friday was our launch day to go to summer camp, which is like major bummer. However, my guitar is like going crazy. Do you know how to mute it? I don't know if I've told you how to mute it. It's pretty simple. Go to the it's like a labeled acoustic, and there's a mute button at the bottom. Did you get it? Maybe you got it. I don't know. Sounds good. All right. Okay. Thanks. Everyone give Kristen a round of applause. She's our resident soundboard. She's a soundboard technician, graphic designer, administrator, janitor, you name it. Like that's Kristen. Kristen does it all. So our announcement is that next week would have been summer camp if it had not been for COVID-19. So we are going to try to like cheer you up a little bit next week. So we have rented out a Kona ice truck, and we're going to have free snow cones next week. So on Thursday we got some free snow cones for you guys. All right. Don't ever say we never did something for you. So we're not doing box wars. No, that is. It would be like social distancing if you think about it. Like you couldn't get more like COVID friendly of a game than Box Wars. No, but we're not doing it.
I was going in the one box.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's totally not okay. Yeah, because you're all going in the one box. Yeah. Yeah, after every run, you just Lysol it really quick. That's part of the game. How fast can you Lysol? Like everyone's breathing it in. Oh man. Yeah, so Box Wars is like a summer camp only game, and for you sixth graders, don't worry, you'll experience it next year, and it'll change your life. Hopefully not with a broken bone, but we do have the Kona ice truck next week, so that'll be fun. All right, that is the announcements we got for right now. Stay tuned for basically any updates that we have in terms of being able to go inside, things like that, and we don't really know. We're just kind of taking it like 1 week at a time, playing it by ear, but it's kind of been like the perfect weather. So like I haven't had a problem with like hanging out here. Like this is gorgeous. God gave us like 72 and sunny today. So pretty amazing. But we are going to open up our Bibles tonight. We're going to talk about a story that we have not talked about in a while, and it's at 1 Samuel 4. You guys got your Bibles, your Biblies? Open up to 1 Samuel 4. There you go. Luke's got his. On an electronic device. And for those of you who haven't memorized, there's tons of people that got it memorized. Look at all you guys. You guys have the whole Bible memorized. That's amazing because you don't have your Bibles. That's awesome. Congratulations. Well, 1 Samuel 4 is where we're going to be at right now. That's where we're going to be right now. And guys, in 1 Samuel, it's kind of 1st and 2nd Samuel are a piece of the history of Israel that is incredibly important for us to see as it points to Jesus. And it's at this point in Israel's history where the Israelites had recently come to the land of Canaan, which is a land in the Middle East, currently the nation of Israel, right on the eastern bank of the Mediterranean Sea. And they got to that land, they conquered it, and they settled it, and they're in that land. And it's great, and things are going great. But at a certain point in time, they started having a lot of problems with the nations around them. They had a lot of these problems. And as they started warring with these nations, one of their problems is that they kept losing. They kept losing these wars. They kept losing these battles, and it was not going well for them. And it kind of reminds me, just like the utter failure that they were experiencing right now, reminds me of a Christmas that we had as a family like 15 years ago. And I was like, I don't know, I don't even know how old I was whenever that was. I think I was like in high school or something like that, or middle school. And I remember that it was Christmas. It was at our family's house, and we were hanging out, and all the extended family were over, and like everybody, my grandparents, the cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone was hanging out. And me and my brother got into one of our like brawls, not like angry punching each other in the face brawl, but like brothers like wrestling. We're just kind of like pushing each other and shoving each other. And it was like right in the middle of everything. Like everyone was talking, and like, my brother David said something, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, blah, blah," and like I just pushed him, and like he was like, "Oh yeah, blah, blah," and he pushed me. That's kind of how it goes. And so like we're pushing each other, we're shoving each other, and at one point, David grabs onto me, and we're like in a bit of a grapple, and he's trying to pull away, and I'm like holding him back, and then I was like, "Fine, I'll let you go," and I let him go, and he just like stumbles backward, like really, really hard. He just flings backward and just flies into whatever was behind him. He had no idea what was behind him. It was actually my grandmother, who was like right behind him, and he just like trucks her, guys. For those of you who don't know my brother, he is a very large man. He's like, he's about Dave's size right now. He was not Dave's size like 15 years ago, but he was still big. He pretty much outweighed me, and I'm 3 years older than him. He pretty much outweighed me since I was like 9 and he was 6. He's like a very big boy, and he just trucks my grandma, guys. Like she just went down, like absolutely went down. It was something to see. It was like a linebacker just hitting a wide receiver who had no idea what was coming. And so everyone got really quiet as we watched my grandma on the floor start to use her cane to get back up. And so by some miracle, she was not injured. I don't know how that happened, but she was not injured. She's a fighter, and she was totally fine. But I just will never forget the feeling of like watching him go backward and seeing my grandma right behind him, and just like watching the collision happen. It was like absolute destruction. And guys, this is exactly what the Israelites were experiencing. The Israelites were my grandma in this situation. Guys, they were getting trucked, like absolutely destroyed from people to people. And it had been a long time since they had rolled into the land and were the ones conquering. Guys, it had been a long time. It was kind of like Michigan fans. Like Michigan fans don't even remember what it was like to be the victors and actually like beat teams. But it happened. It happened a while ago, but it was there in the past. And this is like the Israel. They had just like they had heard stories of winning these wars and winning these battles, but they just like couldn't figure out like why they kept losing now until someone had a good idea. And we're gonna pick this up at 1 Samuel 4. 1 Samuel 4:1. And it says, "And the word of Samuel came to all Israel. Now Israel went out to battle against the Philistines, and they encamped at Ebenezer. And the Philistines encamped at Aphek." I know, crazy names. The Philistines drew up in line against Israel, and when the battle spread, Israel was defeated before the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 men on the field of battle. Not good. Another big defeat. "And when the people came to the camp, the elders of Israel said, 'Why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines?' And then someone says like, 'Hey, I got a great idea. we should do something. And they're like, okay, what do you got? And here's what he says. Let's bring the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord here from Shiloh, that it may come among us and save us from the power of our enemies. And you're like, what's that going to do? What's the Ark of the Covenant? The Ark of the Covenant, if you've ever seen Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, that tells you all you need to know about the Ark of the Covenant. No, it doesn't. But it's basically this old golden box. That's basically what it is. And people would carry it, and they would carry it just like you'd kind of carry a casket, like the pallbearers would carry a casket, like they carry it on their shoulders. But it wasn't a casket. It was this incredible, beautiful, engraved golden box, and inside, historically, laid the 10 Commandments, the tablets that God wrote on His own finger to Israel. And it was a really big deal. The Ark of the Covenant was a really big deal because it was a symbol of the covenant that God gave to His people, the sons and daughters of Abraham. And His covenant was this: if you follow me, if you obey my law, then that means you are my people, and I will be your God, and I will protect you. I will go before you, and I will protect you before your enemies, and I will fight your battles, and I will be your God. And you can know that you have the most powerful being on the planet, in the universe, on your side. That was like, in a general sense, the covenant. It was, you will be my people, I will be your God, I will rescue you, I will save you, and I will lead you and guide you. But you need to follow me completely. And they hadn't really been following Him. But the Ark of the Covenant was like a symbol of that. It was like a symbol of God's presence. And so they remembered a long time ago, their ancestors had gone into the land and had brought the Ark of the Covenant into all these battles. And that was back when they were just kicking butt and taking names. Like, they just kept winning these battles. But the Ark of the Covenant was always there with them. Who remembers the Battle of Jericho, where they walk around the walls of Jericho 7 times? And then on the 7th time, the walls came crumbling down. They were walking with the Ark of the Covenant, right? People started to look at the Ark like it had this magical, this magical property to it. That if you were just had the Ark, that it would just make you win battles. And so someone had the bright idea, guys, we keep losing these battles, but we got the Ark of the Covenant. Like, we got the ace in the hole. Like, we can just bring that thing out. It'll do its magic stuff, and then bam, we win the battle, right? In Raiders of the Lost Ark, Hitler had the same idea. Let's go get the Ark of the Covenant, and then let's win World War II. Same deal, same idea. And they were like, let's do this. Let's bring out the Ark of the Covenant. So they did. Let's see what happened. So the people sent to Shiloh and brought them from there the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord of hosts, who was enthroned on the cherubim. That's a type of angel. And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the Ark of the Covenant of God. As soon as the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all Israel gave a mighty shout so that the earth resounded. They were like, we got the magic Ark, everybody. We got the Ark, and we're going to start winning some battles. Like, this is finally going to happen. They're all excited. Why are they shouting? Because they remember in the days of Joshua when that Ark brought down the walls of Jericho. They remember the time when they brought the Ark out in front of their battles, and suddenly they would win every battle. They won every single war, and they were like, this is the time. The Ark stood for God's presence. It was a symbol of God's presence. And this is where they fall, is that they felt like they could separate the power of God from God Himself. They felt like God's power, you could somehow take His power without dealing with God and kind of control His power like a superpower. Like, you could just kind of take God power and put it in this giant box. And if you have the box with you, then you can win the battle, right? You can win the war. That was the idea. They started to separate God's power from Himself. Like, they could control God. Like, they could figure out how to make God do what they wanted Him to do. And they believed as long as the Ark was with Him, so is His presence. Now, here's the deal, guys. This is an important thing for us to see, is that this was actually a very normal thing that armies would do back in this time. These armies would bring a bunch of priests and an idol of their god to their battles. And the idea was that if you had an army, then you'd want to bring some some godly protection wherever you go, right? I mean, who wouldn't? If we're going to go out to fight a battle, like who wouldn't want a God on your side? And so every single nation, every culture had their own gods and their own like deity that they would worship, and they would bring a bunch of priests and they would bring an idol, and so battles back in this day were more than just like armies going like clashing and battling each other. It was quite literally gods battling each other and clashing against each other. And so if your side won, it would mean that your God won, that your God was bigger than the other God. And it would be like, boom, our God of Mordok beat your God of Molech or something. Like those are a couple gods that they would that they had at that point. And so suddenly, Israel seems to be doing the same thing. They bring out this Ark of the Covenant, which was an incredible symbol of God's presence, and they tried to use it in the exact same way that everyone else was using their idols. So let's see what happens in verse 6. Hearing the uproar, the Philistines asked, "What's all this shouting about in the Hebrew camp?" When they learned that the Ark of the Covenant had come into camp, the Philistines were afraid. "A god has come into the camp," they said. "Oh no, nothing like this has happened before. We're doomed. Who will deliver us from the hand of these mighty gods?" They didn't know at this time that there was only one God. That was like the norm was that every nation had a bunch of gods. So they thought that like the Israelites worshipped a bunch of gods. So they were confused. But there was only one God. And they said this, "These are the gods who struck down the Egyptians with all kind of plagues and wilderness." They remembered what God did to the Egyptians, and it wasn't pretty. Right? There was plagues, and God rescued Israel from bondage and slavery. This is legendary at this time. This story is legendary. And so all of a sudden, they're hearing this big roar from the Hebrew camp, and they're like, uh-oh, they now have Yahweh. That's a problem. I remember what happened when Yahweh was in Egypt, and it didn't work out well for the Egyptians. I remember what happened when Yahweh was in Canaan. It didn't work out for the Canaanites. We're in trouble, guys. So here's what they say. They say this, "Be strong, Philistines, or you will be subject to the Hebrews, as they have been to you. Be men and fight." So literally, this is actually kind of cool. Like, this is straight out of a movie. They're like, "Hey, I know that they have Yahweh, but we're going to be strong and fight. Be men, Philistines." And they're just like, they're ready to go. And on verse 10, it says, "So the Philistines fought, and the Israelites were defeated, and every man fled to his tent. The slaughter was very great. Israel lost 30,000 foot soldiers." 30,000. The ark of God was captured, and Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, died. Ouch. Didn't work, did it? Did the magic box work for them? No, it didn't. Why do you think that is? Because they started treating God the same way that the Philistines treated their God, that the Canaanites who were also around them treated their God. And they felt like they could put God into a box, this Ark of the Covenant, and just kind of get the magic from God without actually worshiping him, or without actually being his people, or following his laws and his commandments. They felt like they could control God. They lost the battle terribly, and the Ark of the Covenant went back to Philistine. Now, what happened when the Ark went back to Philistine? What do you think happened? Do you think it worked out for Philistine and those people? Well, they did what anyone else would do. When you defeat an opposing army, you take their idol, and then what you did is that you put that idol in your temple as a symbol that your God was bigger than their God. So they did that with the Ark of the Covenant. They're like, "Hey, your idol didn't work, so we're going to take the Ark of the Covenant, we're going to put it in our temple," and that's exactly what they did. They put the Ark of the Covenant in their temple, in front of their God, which was this big giant idol, and they put it there as a symbol that Yahweh is now like a lesser God than the Philistine gods. And it did not work out. It only took about a week for all of Philistine to be struck down with plagues and sickness. And every morning when they woke up, the idol was like fallen over and broken, like every single morning. And because God doesn't lose, because you can't control God. You can't put him in a temple. You also can't put him in front of your army expecting him to just do what you want. You can't control God. You can't use God for his power. There's a famous Italian violinist named Niccolo Paganini. And when he died, his instrument, his violin, was one of the most famous violins of all time because it was his, and he used it and he babied it, and he took care of this thing, and it was famous, and it was worth a fortune. So he gifted it to his home city in Genoa, and he gave it to a museum on one condition. Here's what he said: "You can have my violin, but I never want it to be played again, because it was my special violin. I don't want anyone to touch it ever again. And it'll be like my hands touching it and playing it were the last hands ever to touch it and play it." So he was like, "I just want this to be a museum piece. I want it to be put on display." But here's the deal. Any of you guys know about violin craft here in the room? Any violin makers? Okay. Violins actually need to be played in order for them to be taken care of. If you don't play a violin, it actually hurts the violin. They're made to be played. They're created to be played. And so, over time, this violin just became trashed in time. His marvelous violin became like a decaying form of its former self, and now it's so weak that you couldn't even play it if you wanted to. All because he didn't want anyone else to touch it. And when the Israelites tried to do what they did to God, they basically turned the Ark of the Covenant into that decaying violin. This wonderful symbol of something great and wonderful and powerful, God's presence, suddenly became just a box. And instead of having God's favor in the fight, they had the opposite. The first battle, they only lost 4,000 men. Not a great moment, but at least it wasn't like the worst defeat ever. When they brought the Ark of the Covenant, they lost 30,000. Just like that. Israel had to learn that you can't control God. That God doesn't want to be an idol that you can take and force him to do what you want to do. He just doesn't work like that. He's not a vending machine where you can put in a certain amount of things, or you put a certain amount of worship, or you put a certain amount of tithes, or whatever, and then bam, like out comes the soda, like whatever you want. Like that's how we treat God sometimes. Like he's some kind of vending machine, this divine vending machine that gives him what you want. God is not after those little things. He wasn't after the battle for Israel. He was after their hearts, because God wants a relationship. The ark during Joshua's time was a symbol of relationship with Israel, but it wasn't the actual relationship itself. But we do this all the time today. We take God's goodness, we see it in the Bible, and we're like, I want a piece of that. I want a piece of that goodness. I want a piece of that joy, or I want a piece of that comfort, or whatever it is, whatever we pray for. And we feel like we got to do something for God so that he can do something for us, right? Like, I scratch your back, God, you scratch my back. And that's not how a relationship works. Let me ask you the question. How many friendships do you start by saying, hey, let's be friends, but it's going to be based on like me doing stuff for you and you doing stuff for me, okay? So like we'll be friends, and like I'll let you borrow my game system for a bit, and then like then I got to have it back, and then we got to make sure we have this like exchange of goods going on in order for us to continue to be friends. Like how many friendships do you have that are based on that, like giving each other money or something? Like how many people pay their friends to be their friends? Okay, yeah. There should be no one, because friendships don't work like that. You can't have a friend like that. You can't have a relationship like that. You can't look at your brother or your sister or your mom or your dad and say, hey, I want you to be my mom and dad. I'm going to pay you right here. Can you take my payment? Can you take my $5 to be my dad for the day? Like, it doesn't work like that. He's just your dad, and your mom's just your mom, and your brother and sister is just your brother and sister, and your friend's just your friend. It's not based on an exchange of goods. That's not how human relationships work, and that's not how God relationships work. Now, some of you might ask, well, okay, Perry, what does this have to do with the art of togetherness? Right? That's our series. We're talking about being together, existing together, loving one another, how that works in our environment, in our world right now. Well, the deal is that if we start try to use God like the Israelites used God, we will start to use people the same way. Let me say that again. If we start to use God as getting something from him, like an exchange of goods, then that's how we start to view people. People are just objects that you can use to gain something. And like we just said, that's not how human relationships are supposed to work, and that's not how our relationship with the Lord is supposed to work. We begin our relationship with the Lord from a place of surrender. We begin it from a place of surrender, a place of goodness, a place of not deserving his goodness and his mercy and his grace, but then receiving it anyway and becoming his child. And when that becomes our foundation, we start to view other people in the world the way he does. We start to give other people the grace that he gives. We start to give other people the love that he gives, all because we had the right relationship with him from the first place. If we start viewing God like a vending machine, we'll start viewing other people like a vending machine. It sounded silly to view a friend like, I'll give you money to be my friend, right? That's kind of silly. Obviously, no one has a friendship like that. But you can view people as a way to get you up in a social structure, right? Like in a group of friends in school, like if you can view a person like a way to get into a friend group. A lot of middle schoolers, I would say the vast majority, tend to view boyfriends and girlfriends that way. Like having a boyfriend or girlfriend is just something to have because you can tell other people, I have a boyfriend or girlfriend. That's using someone to try to get up in the world. It just is. And in the same way that we're not called to use God, because God doesn't use us, we're not called to use people. We're called to love people. Not to want to get anything or gain anything out of someone else, but to genuinely love them and care for them the way God has called us. We don't use people, we love people. And that's our story for tonight, guys. I wanted to share this with you as we move forward in our series, because I feel like people tend to be being used by others. I feel like people tend to look at others as expendable, and as believers, as Christians, we're supposed to be the ones to say, no, God doesn't see anyone as expendable. God doesn't see anyone as no big deal or can be used and discarded or thrown away. God views everyone precious, and we're called to view people the same way. But it begins with your own heart before the Lord. How do you view God? Is he your eternal Father, who you have a special, unique relationship with? If you do, then you're going to care for other people the same way he does. All right, we're going to do some worship tonight. And Hannah's going to worship with us. It's her first time worshiping with us, so Hannah's going to come up here in a second. Just as a reminder, it takes us a second to get right. And as we get ready to worship, I wanted to talk about our worship just for a second, because I feel like it's kind of become difficult maybe to worship without words. Are you guys doing okay worshiping without words? It's kind of been, I feel like it's probably been a little bit difficult, maybe easier for some people, harder for others. But I wanted to encourage you a little bit about worshiping the Lord. What God wanted out of Israel in this time in 1 Samuel 4 was not for them to bring the Ark of the Covenant before a battle so that they could win a battle. What God wanted was a relationship with them. And the number one way that we connect to the Lord is through worship. Now, worship is a big category. It's not just music. It's not just standing together and singing to him. Every time we pray to the Lord, that's a form of worship. But worship is how we connect to him. It's how we make sure that relationship that we have with God isn't a relationship in our mind of using him. Relationship is a genuine connection to the Lord. And so when we worship God, that's what we're doing. We're connecting. We're coming before him, and we're genuinely connecting to him. We're letting these words become a part of us. And so I know that as we don't have words throughout this worship, it can be kind of difficult to have that connection in our own hearts. But if you can't think of the words, it's okay. Just listen to them and let them become your own. Listen to them and let them become yours. It's not a time to talk to your friends. It's not a time to chat. It's not a time to look at your phone. This is a time to have genuine connection with the Lord. And there are some ways that you can do that. Now, when we talk about baptism, I know this is kind of a left turn. We talk about baptism as an outward sign of an inward reality. That's what baptism is. It's a symbol and the sign of God saving you, and it's something you do. You go into the water. It represents the cleansing work of Christ, and you come out, and all of a sudden you are cleansed and refreshed, right? It's a symbol of what God's already done in your heart. It's an outward sign of an inward reality. When we worship, it can be helpful to have outward signs of an inward reality at the same time. It can be helpful to do that. So, for instance, how many of you guys have ever wondered why people raise their hands when they worship? Dave does. Cool. That's why. It's an outward symbol of an inward reality. What do you think it symbolizes when your hands are up in the air? Like you have a question to God? Hey, God, question. What do you think, Ash?
Like reaching out to him.
Yeah, exactly. It's reaching out to him. That's what it symbolizes. It doesn't mean that when you do it, you're actually closer to God, like by a foot. That's not what it means. It's a symbol of you. Of you saying, "Here's my heart. I want to reach out to the Lord right now." There's another symbol that some people use when they worship, and it's this. You might have your hands like this. What do you think this symbolizes? Like this. What do you think that is? Yeah. You could say, yeah, that could represent him holding your hands, like your hands are stretched out for the Lord. It also typically is a symbol of surrender, right? When you go like this is a symbol of surrender in human form. Right. That's surrender. When your hands are out like that, it's a symbol of surrender. And these things can be helpful. I'm not saying fake it till you make it. That's not what we do. But it can be helpful to have different symbols and things that symbolize what's actually happening in our heart. And when we worship, we connect with the Lord. And that's what I want to encourage us today as we worship together. Okay? So Hannah's going to come up. We're going to do some worship. You guys ready for some worship? I think this is a good time because we're forced not to do all the energy songs. And so we're forced just to do the non-energy songs. And you know what? That's okay. God's going to grow us in that. So let's stand up together. Let's get ready for some worship. All right, guys. All right, as we worship today, we're going to try to walk you through these songs. We're gonna do it as best as we can to help us be on the same page as we sing to the Lord. But this first one it's an oldie but a goodie for us. It's "You've Won Me." And it's simple. It's us calling out to Jesus saying, "You've won me. You've broken every chain with love and mercy, and you've triumphed over death, and you're worthy of glory and praise." And my favorite part of the song is the bridge, where it says, "Shout it out and lift up one voice in worship. Sing it out until the whole earth can hear it. Jesus is alive and he saves, he rescues and saves." That's a cry that this world's going to have. So let's start it right now, all right? All right, let's use our voices a little bit. Whoa, 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 whoa. Grace, you show me grace. You lifted my shame, drawn me with loving kindness, washed whiter than snow. You have redeemed and made me whole. Let's sing Jesus. Jesus, you have won me. You have broken every chain with love and mercy. You have triumphed over death, and you are worthy of the glory and praise. Sing love. Love, you show me love by leaving your throne, by bleeding and dying. Was that wonderful worthy of the glory and praise. Sing it again, Jesus. Jesus, you have won me. You have broken every chain with love and mercy. You have triumphed over death, and you are worthy of the glory and praise. Sing your voices again. Whoa, whoa, Listen, shout it out. Lift up one voice. Shout it out and lift up one voice. You worship, sing it out into all the earth. Can hear it. Jesus is alive and He saves. He rescues and saves. Sing it out, shout it out. Shout it out and lift up one voice. We worship, sing it out into all the earth. Can hear it. Jesus is alive and He saves. He rescues and saves. Sing that one last time. Jesus, you have won me. You have broken every chain with love and mercy. You triumphed over death, and you are worthy of the glory and praise.
So this next song, it's all about how we can stay in our comfort zone. We always have that option in any situation. And that is, honestly, that's the easy thing. In a situation, if you're scared, what you're gonna wanna do is just sit back and be like, okay, I'll just sit back on this one. But guys, that is not what God calls us to do. God calls us higher than that. And it reminds me, I was scrolling through my Instagram feed today and I saw this quote from this preacher that I really admire. And what it said was, you can either be comfortable or you can grow. And you cannot do both at the same time. So, yeah. And so I think that's a huge part about this song. So let's just praise our Father. I could just sit and wait for all your goodness, hope to feel your presence. I could just stay right where I am and hope to feel you, hope to feel something again. I could go back to who I am and change me from the inside. I could be safe, here in your arms and never let these walls down. But you have known me higher, you have known me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You have called me higher, you have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You'll lead me. You have called me higher, you have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You lead me. I can hold on to who I am and never let change me from the inside. I can be safe. I can be safe here in your arms and never leave.
never let these walls down. You have called me higher. You have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me. You have called me higher. You have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me. You lead me. I'll be yours. I'll be yours for all my life. I will be yours. I will be yours for all my life. I'll be yours. I will be yours for all my life. So bless your mercy. Oh, I will be yours. I will be yours for all my life. So bless your mercy. I will not be for me. You will call me higher. You will call me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me. Lord, Lord, yes, you will call me higher. You will call me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me. Lord, Lord, yes, you will call me higher. You will call me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me. Lord, oh, yes, you will call me higher. You will call me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me. Lord, you lead me. All right, as we move into our next song, I want to invite you guys to do this position as we go to our next one. It's called Waymaker, and this is a really good song to be in a position of surrender. Obviously, like, your hands don't make anything special or magical, and you don't have to do it if you're not comfortable. It's totally fine. But it's a position of the heart. It's a position of the heart. Am I going to be in a place of surrender right now? And the fact is that God is here. God is with us. He's moving in our midst. And the chorus for this is simple. It's that you are a way maker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. And it's us simply stating that's who you are. Like, it's not even like we're not even in this picture. We're just stating the fact of who God is. It's not about us. It's about him. And the bridge is very real. Because how many of us have ever felt a feeling that, like, even like when we don't feel God, like nothing's really happening? Like, ever had a feeling of like God's not there, or like nothing's really there? It's just like empty space. Yep, silence. The bridge is a really cool, powerful truth. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. It's a simple truth, and we need to be able to say that together. Let's sing this out. This is a reminder, you don't have to do this with your hands, but this is a great time to do it. It's a heart place. It's a place of surrender. It's not about us, it's about him, and he's moving and he's working regardless of us, regardless of our feelings. Let's lift him up. So you are here moving in our midst. You are here moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. Sing that again. You're here. You are here moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here working in this place. I worship you, I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Sing it out, you're here. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you, I worship you. Healing every heart. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, bending every heart, mending every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 Here's when we sing it out. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. Sing out this truth. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 Let's sing it one last time. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Heavenly Father, Lord, it's only in your light, it's only in your goodness that we have hope, that we have truth. God, give us the strength to believe in that completely, Lord, that you are a way maker, Lord, that you are light in the darkness, Lord, in the same way that you guided and lighted Israel through so many trials, through so many difficult situations, Lord. Lord, all you ever ask for them is for them to be yours. Lord, you didn't ask to be an idol. Lord, you asked to be theirs. Lord, so God, we pray that you do that in our hearts, Lord, that you wouldn't be an idol in us, but that you just be our God, and we follow, submit to completely. God, we love you. We pray that this would be true in our hearts right now. God, we pray this in your name. Amen. All right, guys. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being a part of the Rock. We ended just a little bit early, so we got some extra time for 9 Squared. There you go. And thank you. Chairs. Everyone, please grab chairs. 8th grade boys. Thank you. 8th grade boys.